understand the unique financial issues that sometimes come up between allied health and medical students. When Kim was in medical school, I was a consulting actuary in downtown Dallas, so I spent 10 years there. I was a mathematician in undergrad and graduate school, and but I became an actuary in downtown Dallas, and I worked primarily on retirement and post-retirement medical disability related items, but a lot of it also involved compensation models and all the kinds of things that go with retirement planning, income, things like that. So in the process, I would be assigned sometimes. I remember a couple of times I did this that were really entertaining. I went up at Coca-Cola bottling distributors in El Paso to explain to their employees about basic finances and retirement. And so you have a room of blue-collar workers and trying to explain the complexities of a pension plan to them. And I was at another company in San Angelo, and the way the program started was the owner of the company came in with a bag of dog food and threw it on the table and said, if you don't listen to this guy and follow his instructions, you're going to be eating this for retirement. And that's how we began our presentation. So I wound up on the personal financial side of things because of that. Because a lot of individuals were trying to plan for retirement. What happens to me when I retire? How much debt you're carrying into retirement would drive a lot of that. But I do think you have a unique situation where I grew up in a a white-collar home. My dad actually has a PhD from University of North Carolina, Chapel Hills Medical School. But it was back when allied health and medical school were mixed. So he went to 2 years of medical school and then 4 years of PhD work in public health. And then he ran the Texas Department of Health laboratory for 25 years. That's where they do testing of water for all the communities in the state of Texas and things like that. They do newborn screening. They do, I remember rabies testing primarily because when I was a kid at midnight, he'd have to rush down to check to see how that particular test was, because they wanted to know they're gonna have to start jabbing this 5-year-old with those notorious rabies shots at the time, which I think the needles were 42 inches long or something. But anyway, so also I remember they had a lot of lab mice, and so when I was a kid I would go down there and play with them, and those are things I remember. So I grew up in that home. My parents weren't wealthy, but we had sufficient resources. So some of this medical school and allied health thing, one of the things that's driving it is that I do know this from having been around medical school and medical students quite a bit, is that it is impossible to work your way through medical school. That's just an impossibility. And this is where debt a lot of times plays a much bigger role in medical student and allied health students than it will maybe in other educational situations. Normally speaking, if you listen to Dave Ramsey or other financial people, they'll tell you, do not ever take out student loans for school, or do so very sparingly. And I think that's a good rule of thumb. But if you're a medical student or you're an allied health student, that is almost an impossibility unless you are either have parents that are funding your education or you're married to someone who's got a good job. My wife and I benefited from the fact that I was a consulting actuary and had a good source of income, so that when she graduated from medical school, we were basically debt-free in 6 months, and that's pretty unheard of. We had very little debt from school, and we paid it off in the first 6 months of her residency. So, all right, so I'm going to give you a couple of rules of thumb, and then I would like for this to be somewhat interactive too, because you're going to have questions. You may have a unique situation without divulging too much of your own personal finances or whatever you feel comfortable doing, and talk through some of these things. First of all is that everyone should have at least an accessible reserve of cash, so that if your car breaks down, you're not immediately on the credit card treadmill of 20% revolving debt. Credit cards at 20% are really much worse than that. They say 20%, but the way the math is calculated on credit cards and the daily averaging they use, it's much more severe than that. So a 20% credit card really has the effect of about 25%. You'd be almost better off at a pawn shop. So because of that, what will happen is that most Americans do very little planning, and then they have a flat tire. And they go in to get the flat tire changed, and the guy at the tire shop goes, those other 3 tires, and they're like, talk them into 4, and instead of just plugging the nail hole, they bought 4 tires. They're now out $900, and it's like $900. I don't have that in my pocket. Let's see, what do I have? And it's a piece of plastic, you know. And it's like, well, here, just put it on there. We'll let Visa pay for it, you know. And pretty quickly, that lifestyle creates perpetual poverty, perpetual middle class poverty, or even upper middle class or poverty. Is that there are many individuals with a very substantial income but are living paycheck to paycheck because of those kinds of choices. So make decisions now where you say, I'm going to spend less than I make, which is a nutty thing for me to say to a room full of individuals who all you get are bills to pay tuition and fees, and you have no source of income. So, but this is where you need to start kind of setting your goals on how you're going to do your financial life. So let me just give you a few things. First of all is, like I said, you need $1,000 emergency cash. Refrigerator goes out, car breaks down. You need to be able to pay for those things without dipping into a credit card or revolving debt situation. All right, so you're going to get your degree, you're going to get your residency finished, whatever it is. Residency you get paid. It was around $32,000 when Kim was in residency. Is it about 40 now?
It's like 60.
60, okay. It really has cranked up. Okay, good. That's only just because she was logging 100 hours a week, and I think on an hourly basis, I figured out she was making less than minimum wage, especially if you did time and a half over the 40 hours. So, yeah, that was brutal, especially when she was in the ICU and was wearing the pager. Because then, you know, it was incredibly stressful and long hours. So $32,000 a year, that was a pretty big price to pay for the kind of work hours she's putting. So 60, all right, 60,000. This means you're not going to probably make a lot of progress on your debt in those 3 to 4 or 5 years of residency. However, you shouldn't be taking on any additional debt. I would say that. When you get into residency at this point, your goal should be to at least tread water on the debt level and have it not escalate on you. At 60 grand a year, you should be able to get you a nice 1-bedroom apartment, or if you're married, 2-bedroom, or whatever, you know, and be able to keep that debt from growing. Once you finish medical school, you need to cap that sucker off and keep it at that level until you can start paying on it. And even during residency, if you can chip away at it a little bit, I would recommend it. Okay, so $1,000 cash. All right, let me just give you a couple things that absolutely destroy finances. The 2 biggest financial eaters in all of American life. Number 1 is buying too expensive a house, and number 2 is buying brand new cars over and over. And let me tell you how this works, okay? So you finish residency, you're now got your first job. You're getting paid $120,000, $150,000 a year, maybe more. It depends on your spot, but you start out at $120,000 for the first couple of years with a bonus in there. That if you generating some revenue, you get some additional bonus, and you're like, man, all right. And you go, you know what? I'm tired of apartment living. I want to go buy a house. And here's what the lender will do. The lender will they make money on the size of your loan. They don't have your best interest in mind. They have their best interest in mind. If they loan you $500,000, they make twice as much as if they loan you $250,000. So here's the way they do this. They go, oh, let me see your income. And then they look at your school debt and they discount it completely. It's almost non-factor in calculating this. And so they go, okay, your income times 3. That's how much house you can buy. So let's suppose you're making $150,000 a year. They go, that's a $450,000 house. And you can deduct the interest, and they give you all this spill. And I'm telling you right now, you have just helped fund his house or her house and bought your poverty in the process. 3 times income is a terrible idea because they assume at 3 times income you're not going to buy any food, you're never going to give any money to church or charitable causes, you're never going to go on a vacation, that you're going to drive a 40-year-old car that you can push half the way there so you're not using gasoline. They are assuming you are never going to have any fun. So they want you to buy the 3 times house, because the other thing in the 3 times house is usually means more square footage, which means you've added electric bills that are double, you've added water bills that will go up because you have a property now in a neighborhood that if you have one blade of grass that's brown, they're going to kick you out of the neighborhood. So instead of 3 times income, before you go to the mortgage company, before you buy a house, I think buying a house is a good idea. Especially if you get at an employer you feel really comfortable with, you like the neighborhood, you like the area, you go, man, I think I could plant roots here. That's all good. 1.5 times salary. My wife and I have lived this policy our entire married life, 1.5 times salary. This means our monthly outflow for mortgage represents less than 20% of our monthly income after taxes. And that is not a burden. That's you can adjust with that. And that's us on a 10-year mortgage. In fact, we'll be out of it in 3 years. And then the 2 rent houses we own, we'll be out in 5 years on both of those. Wow. Completely debt-free. In which case, the rental house income will be generating about $2,500 a month, $30,000 a year, with no other outlay other than insurance and taxes. Okay, so target 1.5 times pay. In fact, if you can do less than that, even better. 1 times pay. If you're getting $150,000 a year, a $150,000 house. Here's what I would do. Here's what I would do, because this is what we did. Buy that house. Your income grows a little bit. Get that house paid down. Buy it on a 15-year note. Put 20% down so you're not paying mortgage insurance. We'll talk about that in a minute. And then about 4 or 5 years into that, you go, I'd like to upgrade. We're going to turn this into a rental house. So you make that a rental house. You go buy another house about 5 years into it. And then about 5 years into that house, you buy a $175,000 house, upgrade a little bit. 5 years in that, you go, this now becomes a rental house. We have 2. I wish I'd held on to a third one. I made a mistake in selling it. I wish I'd held on to it. I should have had 3, and I would have already owned that one outright. I wished we had held on to it. I made a mistake. The guy renting from it, I knew, and he wanted to buy it from me. And I went, okay. Instead, I should have held on to it because I would have owned it outright. About 20 years into this, you now have 3 rental properties. You own one of them outright. And by about the time you reach retirement, you now have an income stream that is pretty substantial. And if you say, well, I don't want to manage renters, there's companies that will manage it for you and give you the most of the income. So on housing, this is where most people get bankrupt, because they go into the mortgage company, they go, you can borrow $450,000. You go to the real estate agent, the agent will say, well, what did the mortgage company pre-approve you for? You say $450,000. Well, you know what? The real estate agent is not going to take you to the $150,000 neighborhood. Why?
He needs to make commission.
Their income is also based on how big a house they're going to sell you. 3 times more money for that real estate agent to sell you the $450,000 house than the $150,000 house. You've just fallen into the trap of the mortgage company and the real estate agent. And guess what? The $450,000 house, you walk into that house, you are going to be impressed. You're going to walk in and go, this is home. You walk into a $150,000 house, you go, it's okay. Right, but then you want to go out to eat. You're like, well, where are we going out to eat? I think McDonald's has the $1 meal. And you want to give money away. You come across a situation at church, a ministry, missions, a family member in need, and you're completely hamstrung now. Things that would give you an enormous amount of joy, especially if you're a believer in Christ Jesus, but even people who are not believers in Christ Jesus, I think enjoy the idea of being able to help someone out. And you've hamstrung yourself now, and you can't do that. And so housing is your biggest albatross financially. So don't buy into this, how much money can we be approved for, and then tell your real estate agent that, because they know the neighborhood to take you to. They know the best $450,000 neighborhood. They know how to get you hooked, and you've now made a lifetime decision, and it is impossible to get out from under that. And here's the other reason. If housing market drops, a $150,000 house can still be flipped. A $450,000 house, you cannot get rid of it. You cannot. You are stuck. That housing market drops 20%, which just happened in 2007. You can sell a $120,000 house. You might take a $5,000 loss. That $450,000 house, people won't touch it for even $400,000. They won't touch it for $350,000. You've now taken a $100,000 bath. I'll say to you right now, think in advance about housing, about how you're going to do that. So while you're in residency, renting an apartment, cheap. Go cheap, safe. You go cheap, and make sure it's safe. But go cheap, and then when you go to buy a house, which I think homeownership is a good idea. I do think you should buy a house. I think it's a good idea. 1.5 times pay, follow that rule. And if you're married and you both have a source of income, like my wife and I, really we've been under 1.5. Really, for the most part, we've been around 1 times income, and it has been so liberating to be able to do that. So if a renter leaves, we're not freaked out. It's like, we can float that for a few months so we find someone. While they're gone, we'll remodel. That kind of thing. So, okay, so that's the first thing. Any questions on housing?
How certain should you be that you're gonna be in that area for the next X number of years before you buy a house? Like, I
Yeah.
know for a lot of us, it's gonna be fairly volatile as we figure out residencies, postdocs, so on.
Totally
and so
agree.
forth.
If you're willing to flip it as a rental property and you're willing to buy a house that's reasonable, I wouldn't worry about it. Because one of two things, either you can wait, you can rent it out until a housing market pops back up and sell it. But again, if you buy that $450,000 house, I would say that's a terrible idea unless you're certain. But if you're gonna buy a $150,000 home in a middle class 20-year-old neighborhood or 15-year-old neighborhood, I wouldn't be as nervous about it. If you go, wow, looks like this job might work out for me. You know, this neighborhood in East Plano looks nice, or this neighborhood in McKinney looks nice, or whatever, wherever you're gonna live, or Arlington or whatever. And you say, I'm gonna buy that house, but buy one, you go, wow, if in 2 years we gotta move out, either we can sell it or rent it. But if you ask me, you take me to the house and it's 500 grand, I'm like, you are stuck. You better like that job. And you better hope it doesn't get, that the business doesn't go belly up or something like that, because and if you have to foreclose on a house, you're not clearing that off your credit report. And, okay, so here's what happens. This is complicated, but if you have a house foreclosure or you miss house payments, it hits your credit report. You're aware of this, right? Equifax and all those. And what happens is it bleeds over into every other area of your life. Your automobile insurance is now $55, $60 more a month just for that. Like, what does that have to do with anything? Because your automobile company will run your credit report to determine your credit risk in determining that. Your life insurance can be more. It's nuts, but they'll run a credit report sometimes on this stuff because they figure if you're an at-risk with your credit, you're also going to skydive. I mean, I don't know, stuff like that. And so, and then you go to buy a car and you want to buy it with credit, which I don't recommend. But if you were going to do it, now instead of paying 3% on an automobile loan, you're going to pay 6% on them. It bleeds over into every aspect of your life, and that's the other reason to be very careful about the housing, especially. It's the most painful thing to miss on. They will punish you for 7 years on that thing. And that's why you want to be really careful about your housing choice. Get a good, trustworthy real estate agent who will definitely steer you into a right neighborhood. Make sure the house has been thoroughly inspected, foundation's good, all those kinds of things. But that it's a good price for the market. Don't fall in love with the house. Fall in love with a good deal. If you fall in love with the house, you're in trouble. Same with the car. I just love this car. Oh no, get out of it then. Run. At the times we buy cars, which we try to drive them 10 years. Try to drive them until they're dead. And I put a ton of miles on them because of baseball coaching. But anyway, I put a ton of miles on them. But what you want to do is get a good 10 years out of them. What you want to do is not fall in love with the car. You want to research what's a good value. Buy a car in August, September is always the best time to buy the prior year's model. And you can pay $5,000 to $6,000 less for that same model if you buy it in August. They're trying to clear the prior years out. Those kinds of things. If you'll do that, and then you drive them till they're death, and I just buy them online. I just make an offer to the dealership and go, that's what I'm willing to pay. And they'll email back saying, yeah, or nope. And I go, okay, I'll check another dealership. And then they email me back, sorry, we changed our mind, we won't take that money. So that's the way to buy a car. Don't go on the lot and walk around. The salesperson comes up, oh, let's test drive this. You're in trouble. Don't do that kind of thing. They spray that new car smell in there, and they do it in the houses too. You go into the builder's got it, and you walk in and just, it's addictive. It's a drug. It should be illegal. The FDA should regulate that aroma because it causes people to make addictive and bad choices. It's as bad as any other drug I can think of. And so you walk into that new house and a new builder and you just go, oh, they have the model home. And then you put your stuff in there and you go, what happened? I walked in the model home and it was like stellar. I walk in our house and go, we should have bought the $150,000 house. Our furniture fits better with that, So, just be careful about that kind of thing. That kind of momentary purchases of stuff is really trouble. That's why Amazon's such a dangerous thing. You can buy in a couple of clicks, and now you can buy cars and houses pretty quickly too. And so you want to think about your purchases up front. So housing's the number one albatross for your financial security long term. Yes?
What about buying a property during residency?
Okay, yeah, that's a good question. My wife and I actually bought a house while she was a second-year medical school.
Oh, you're assuming you have just one income.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So like my wife and I, we bought it while she was in medical school. And again, you go, well, when you move, well, we paid $90,000 for the house. We wound up selling that house. That's the one I wish I'd held on to, but we sold it for $130 because the market went up after that. So we still turned a pretty good profit on it. But it's not a bad idea. Now, here's the only thing: if you're going to buy somewhere where the commute is not bad, this changes the dynamic of it, because from here, if I take up a map and draw a circle, a 10-mile radius around the medical school, there's some challenges to that. You're either going to have to buy a very small, much older house, or you're going to wind up in some pretty expensive neighborhoods. That's just the reality of this. We wound up in South Grand Prairie, and with the commute. So if you're willing to put up the commute, then yeah, there's some places you can get down south of I-20. If you go north, it's a 50% price difference. North of 635, south of I-20. It's about a 50% markup. Same house, exact same house, same builder. It'll be $200,000 there. It's gonna be $150,000 south of I-20, that kind of thing. So if you're willing to commute, it's not a bad idea. Now here's the thing though, you have to know where you're going to work. What your residency?
I'm gonna start in Houston, actually. And my question was
In
regarding
Houston?
loans, yeah.
Yeah.
How you finance.
Yeah, actually
Yeah.
Houston's medical area, I'm assuming you're in the near Rice
Yeah,
University, in the
yes.
heart of all that stuff, and Bentab and all those things. The nice thing about that is there probably is just south of there some reasonable housing in that
correct,
area. Yeah,
But
that's,
those are all condominiums or townhouses, and financing, I guess, is what I'm not sure about too.
yeah, that's not a bad idea, because as long as you buy at a reasonable level, those are houses you can turn into a rental property and a long-term income.
Right, yeah.
That's not a bad investment. Yeah, I would say as long as it doesn't strap you in a way that you're making bad financial choices other places. In other words, you get a monthly payment, you have to make that sucker. I mean, you have to. Because like I said, it bleeds over everywhere else if you don't. But if you go, yeah, I feel really certain with that, I would say that's not a bad idea. Because that's a good property to turn into investment or stay there for a while. You wind up working there in that area. There's a lot of jobs, obviously, in that medical complex down there. So, yeah.
If I may, just
Yeah.
if I could add to that. My name's Mark Negro, by the way, I'm one of the faculty.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so I appreciate all your comments because I'm reliving a lot of my memories.
Yeah.
And they're great. I would say to your question, and I'd be interested to get your thoughts, because the debt thing is a big deal. And, you know, my wife and I, we finished, I think it was maybe $150,000 between the two of us or so. And, you know, it struck me at about 2 years into sort of our job that I'm like, holy cow, I'm paying off a house here. And it's like a house payment.
Yeah.
And so, and then about 2 years later, I was like, holy cow, I'm not really saving anything for retirement. And so the thing that hit me was the debt payment and how that just ripples down in terms of the long-term, your ability to save for these things. And so, I mean, if I had to do it all over again, now we bought a house during residency and we were like you. I mean, we bought it for $120 and we actually sold it for like $180. And so it worked out.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I, in retrospect, I'm wondering about the idea of just continuing to live very sparsely and using all your resources to pay your educational debt down as fast as you can. And you guys were in a great situation because you're out
Yeah. It was
6 months.
Right.
But I mean, most people are going to be on 10, 20-year payouts.
Right.
Yeah.
And so the faster you get that debt taken care of, the faster you can start putting those dollars towards retirement. That was the message that I came
Sure.
up with.
Yeah, and the only reason I don't mind this one, if you're buying one you can turn to a rental property, because for retirement, that is,
Absolutely.
for us, that can be. But and the other thing is I wouldn't buy one unless it's similar to an apartment price you would pay. In that regard, I totally agree. If you can pay for an apartment for half the price of that mortgage, then I'd probably still do the apartment. If you look around and go, wow, it looks like I'm about break even. Right now, rentals are really expensive. Apartments in the area have thinned down enough to where right now your mortgage payment may be similar. If that's the case, then I might try to get an investment out of it. If I looked at it and went, no, I can pay half that for the apartment, I would do the apartment and save my money. So that's where you gotta measure. And I don't know for sure the housing in that area, but I do know south of Ben Taub in that area, about 5-10 miles south of there's a lot of housing in that area,
Well,
especially
condo,
down
like
toward
condo-
Hobby
Yeah,
and.
condo land,
Yeah, there's a lot of things down there, but that's great insight because you guys are graduating with debt. It is an albatross, that a mortgage, school debt, and car debt, the three albatrosses. And then what people do to add to it, they start using credit cards to float their living. And then now you have the fourth leg of strangulation and bankruptcy. So yeah, so those are things that I would definitely consider, absolutely, because you are gonna, if you're graduating with debt, I would probably measure that with what's the mortgage payment versus the apartment. And if I can get half that, I'd go to the apartment and live sparsely, like you said. If I go, it's about a wash, I might try to get an investment property and think long-term about it though. Think in terms of, can I rent this 20 years from now, will I still be getting rental income for it? That kind of thing, yeah. Good insight, thank you, sir. Yeah, absolutely. All right, so, let's, by the way, on houses, the thing that will surprise you too is that electric bill, if you get an older home and it's got really lofty sight lines, you know, you walk in and go, oh, your eyes just drift upward. Well, the electric company loves you. They love you. You go, look at that huge window on the back, and I look at it and go, wow, you are in trouble. You better plant about 42 trees right there, because in Texas especially, electric bill can really hit you. And I'm around some neighbors of mine. We bought a one-story house in our neighborhood. Almost all the other houses are two-story. Many of them pay $400 to $500 a month in electric bills in the summer, and while we're paying $250. And so you know, you walk in, look at this two-story. Look at the handrail on that upper floor, and I'm like, yeah, right, yeah. TXU loves you. They are going to make so much money off of you, and so those kinds of things should also be factored in that. So if you're going to buy a house, usually apartment utilities will be about half what a house would be, depending again on sight lines and, you know, that kind of thing. When Kim and I first got married, we lived in the Village. You know where the Village is? Over on Lovers Lane and stuff over in that area. And they had the community utility thing, so we were paying $20 a month for electric and water total. So we had a $380 a month rent and about $20 a month in utilities, and I was pulling down 60-70 grand a year. And so even while Kim was in medical school, you know, it wasn't hard to kind of not build up medical debt. We just, you know, and medical school is probably quite a bit cheaper at that point too. I suspect it's probably doubled in cost. If you'll drive a car 5 years and trade it in throughout your life, every 5 years, you will, and then contrast that with, I'm going to buy a car every 10 years and drive it to its death. The difference between the two is $150,000 over your driving lifetime. So if you will buy a car, better to buy it a couple of years old, used, and drive it for 10 years until its death, until you go, well, what about the repairs? I have never seen a situation where the repairs, well, I have once, where the repairs got so big that it was worth the payment. Okay, I did have my mechanic once tell me, Daniel, I'm not fixing this car. I drove a year and a half without AC in it, and then it needed like some pretty substantial work, and he goes, I'm not fixing your car this time. It was 12 years old, it had 250,000 miles on it, and Stan, my mechanic, went, go buy a replacement. So I did, I bought the newest model of that exact vehicle. I'm driving it now, and I will drive it for 12 to 13, 14 years until we take a gun and shoot it, you know. That's the best way to do it.
So what's the car?
That one is a Nissan Pathfinder. Because I coach baseball, I gotta be able to get a mass amount of baseball gear in the back of the vehicle. So, but, you know, I would recommend you buy it as cheaply as you can. And my wife and I, we have 2 incomes and that kind of thing, so buying a $25,000 SUV is not
You get baseball
unreasonable.
players without AC in your car.
What's that?
You get baseball players without AC in your car.
You're gonna play in 100-degree weather on the field, what's the difference? Roll the window down.
In your poor car.
Yeah, no, it was fine. Yeah, no, it was fine. And the only problem is that since I'm a pastor of a church now, I would drive to the hospital and I would have to go into the lobby of the hospital for about 15 minutes and like let the sweat kind of evaporate, you know. And but I did that for a year and a half, and I didn't want to replace the AC because my mechanic was going, you know, if you repair this, there's a bunch of other repairs coming, and he was right. And so I finally went, okay, I'm just going to get rid of it. But the goal is to drive them till their death. okay? If you go, wow, look at that new car, stop, just don't do it. 10 to 12 years, drive them till their death. Better to buy them a couple years old. Depreciation in the first 2 or 3 years is pretty dramatic. You can avoid the repair issues primarily by just doing a little research on what cars last longer, which cars have better maintenance cost. You live in a world where that information is readily available. And a family of 4 can ride in a 4-door small sedan very easily. You don't need, the Cadillac Escalade for a family of 4. If you have 8 kids, then maybe, but so automobiles and driving them to their death. I deal regularly as a pastor with people counseling couples on finances because of my financial background. So I have a couple in front of me just 2 weeks ago. Sit in front of me, they come, they have financial issues, they give me their income. It's $8,000 a month in income, and I'm looking down through the line items of expenses, and I see this car, it says $750. I was like, okay, so you have payments on both cars. They go, no, that's just one car payment. And I knew they didn't have a Lamborghini, so I was trying to figure out what happened. I went, how do you have a $750 car payment? They said, well, at year 3, we decided to trade up. So what had happened is they were upside down on the car. They were upside down 10 grand on their trade-in. So they just rolled the 10 grand into the new 30 grand on the new car. So now we have a $40,000 car payment. And they had done that before, which is why they were so behind on that one. So now they're 3 cars into being behind. And this note was like a 60-month or 72-month note of $700 plus a month on a car that's depreciated value. Like if they were to try to trade it in, they'd have to pay 20 grand for someone to take it off their hands. That is called spending yourself broke. And this is where trying to pay down debt gets completely stymied. Because I looked at their debt, they do have some school debt and stuff like that. And I look at it and go, y'all, if they didn't have that car payment, $750, they would be clearing a lot of their debt. But they're hamstrung, they can't get rid of it either because they're so upside down in it. So automobiles are an absolute albatross, and it's the second biggest killer of your finances. You want a nice new car? That's great. Have the money for it. You want a nice new car? Save up for it. Buy that car outright with cash. Great if you want a new car. But if you don't have the money for it, don't buy it. That's a sure way to go bankrupt, okay? And here's the thing, that new car smell, if you go to Walmart, they have the spray, I'm not kidding, seriously, they have the spray in the back in the automotive section. It's about $2, it's a little thing like this, a little aerosol thingy. It's the new car smell. You go back to the back of Walmart, they got it back there. Take your 12-year-old car, clean it out real good, and spray that in there every day. You just get in the car and you're like, all right, the new car smell, and you'll be fine. You won't know the difference. So I do think where you do want to spend money on automobiles is the maintenance of the automobile. That is a good idea. Oil changes that are pretty regular, 3,500 miles, that kind of thing. Checking your tires regularly to make sure you don't have uneven tread wear. Rotating tires and having the car balanced, that costs some money, and you go, wow, is that worth it? Well, you can add 20,000 miles to your set of 4 tires if you make sure the car is well balanced. If you feel like it's pulling like this a lot on you, that kind of thing, you may be wearing one side of the tire out quite a bit. And if you do that, what happens is you're shortening the life of that tire, maybe cutting it in half. So you buy a 60,000 mile tire that's at 35,000 miles, you're down there going, I got to replace them because the car won't pass inspection. So.
Yeah, if you buy your tires from discount tire company, it's lifetime balancing and rotation. So
Yep.
that's how, I've been doing it for years.
Yeah, and if a discount also is if you get a nail in the tire too, they'll plug it for free. Always, if you get a flat, go there first because they'll plug it for free, even if you didn't buy it from them. So always go to discount tire company. And oftentimes they can be plugged. You run over a nail somewhere, most of the time those can be repaired. If you got pretty good tread on that tire, I'm plugging that sucker. You do not need to go buy new tires there. But discount tire is great about that. So even if you don't buy it from them, if you get a flat, go there and they'll plug that sucker for you. So I would do good maintenance on the car. I do think if you have a 12-year-old car, I just spent $600 repairing the axle boots on my wife drives an Altima. It's probably 12 years old. I don't know, 10, 12 years old. The axle boot, it started to leak, and if you don't repair it, the entire axle will eventually burn out. Well, in the boot it's like the joint of your elbow, you know, the way the axle moves up and down. If you don't have any fluid on your elbow, that goes poorly. Well, same in a car, it will eventually burn that thing out. Well, now you're talking about a $4,000 repair. So I spent $600 on that, but things like that, maintenance where you just go, well, if I don't do this, the bigger repairs are gonna come along that could be a lot more expensive. So where I would spend money on automotive is buy a car, drive it to its death, but keep it up maintenance wise. Get the oil changed, get a mechanic you trust. If you don't have one, let me know, because my mechanic is really good. I trust him completely. He's like, you don't need that. Yeah, you don't need that. Don't listen to the salespeople. And in fact, my niece, she and her baby live with us now, but I have 8 people living in my house now. It's crazy. My mother-in-law, my niece, anyway. Kim and I live in a guest room for the last 5 years. What happened was she went on a. My mother-in-law lives in the master bedroom. So me and my wife and the 2 kids live in the 3 kid rooms in the back of the house and share this little kid bathroom. So what happened was Kim went to the Sudan on a mission trip, and her mom, I would go over to check on her mom, and the keys to the car would be still in the door, and she would be in the house. Or I would come home and the keys to the house would be in the front door. And I'm like, Mom, you left the keys to the house and the car are hanging from the front door here. Why don't you move in with us? And so we just put her in the master suite. I said, Kim had been living in a tent in Sudan for 3 weeks. It's like, this was an upgrade. So, so we moved in there. So that's the other thing. If you will save and not overextend yourself, then situations like that come up. You don't even think about it. You're like, I'll just move Mom in. My niece and her 18-month-old really needed a place to be, and you don't even think about it, you just go, but if you are strapped financially, and the first thing in your mind is, wow, I'd really like to help my cousin out. Something's happened to them beyond they're a really good person, I'd love to help them out, and you go, and the first thing you think of is, I can't afford that. You don't want to be in that spot. You want to be able to live with your hands open, and the best way to do that is to not overextend yourself so that you can live with your hands open. So like my wife is headed on a trip May 19 through the 29th somewhere in the world. I'm not going to disclose, but she's going to go work with kind of an indigenous refugee situation. But like if you're strapped and you're a medical person and you go, man, I'd really love to go do this, like go to the Sudan. My wife's been to the Sudan 4 times. She's been several other places like that, and she can just go. So like we found out this trip 2 or 3 weeks ago. And if you're financially strapped though, you go, wow, I wish we could do that. But if you're not living paycheck to paycheck, you just go, oh good, another opportunity, go. And so as a believer, you want to live in a way that you can live with your hands open, your life open, and you can really encourage other people, family, a church, a ministry like that, medical missions, stuff like that. Many of you got into the medical profession, whatever you're doing, because you have a desire to actually help people. I know that's what you're supposed to say in the interview in that medical school. And there probably are medical students you've been around who that is not their motive. They're either just science nerds, and this was the next, that's the next thing to do because you're a science nerd, or a few of them because they look at it and go, man, ortho guys are pulling down 500 grand a year or 50 grand a month. That sounds like a great idea. There's always some of those. But you came to this gathering. I assume that part of the reason you're in the medical profession is you really do have a desire to help people. That includes people you see at your practice every single day or at the hospital, wherever you are. But I think it also probably goes beyond that. And there's going to be a desire to help patients in places who, if you're not there, don't have help at all. And it's really hard to do that if you buy the $500,000 house and the $50,000 car and you're flipping it every 3 years. Then it's like, well, those people over there, I'd love to help them. There's a trip just came up, but we're floating food on this credit card. And then you've wrecked your life. Because the things that would really give you joy are gone, and the things that are stressing you out, like an AC repair on your $500,000 house, is dominating your thinking. Don't waste your life, okay? So that's not really a financial piece of advice, it's more spiritual, but that family sitting in front of me, she's a dental hygienist, and she goes to Mexico every year with us when we do medical clinics with the pastors. We do pastor training in Mexico, and one of the things we do over there, Kim sees all the kids and families and everything because many of them are rural pastors in places where they have nothing. These guys are living on nothing. Most of them are bivocational, that kind of thing. But we also take a dentist down there, clean all their teeth, fix any dental needs. For them, for us, it's a way to provide a little bit of financial relief. For them, they wouldn't go get that tooth fixed. They'd just let it get abscessed, basically. But this dental hygienist she's the lady sitting in front of me. And for her to miss 2 days of work now is stressful. And it shouldn't be. She should be able to just go, I'm gonna go clean teeth of these rural indigenous Mexican pastors and their kids, because that's something that my heart really wants to do. But now she's having to make this decision because that was $750 car payment that's got them completely strapped. And so I think you'll find more joy by spending less on stuff and more on living with your hands open. And your joy. So as a pastor, see, as an actuary, I was a risk manager. As an actuary, I was a risk manager. I wanted to minimize corporate risk to financial bankruptcy because of some pension or post-retirement medical plan or something like that. As a pastor, I'm a risk manager also. I want to maximize your return and minimize your losses. And to maximize your return and minimize your losses means you live with your hands open. You live with as much resources as you can, paying it forward into the kingdom, and when you step out of this life into the next. Because I want to maximize your joy. And so I'm a risk manager of a different sort now. It's kind of weird. I went from managing pension assets and stuff like that on retirement plans to your individual joy account. You have a joy account. It's like a retirement account. The difference is you don't get a monthly statement. You don't. You don't know how much is in there. But you usually know when you're putting stuff in. You don't know how much is in there, but you usually know when you've made a deposit. Because you do something that just thrills your heart and you feel like God's calling you to do it, and you have some personal sacrifice to it, but you don't go, oh man, you go, wow, that hurt a little, but I'm so glad, that we made that decision. And when you do, there's a deposit that happens. And there's some risk to it. I mean, Kim run into the Sudan for 3 times. There was a little bit of risk to that. I went to the Sudan too. I went up in Darfur for a week. And there's some risk to that. But doing it when you just go, boy, your heart soars while doing it, then you go, that's the when you're hugging your 8-year-old at the airport, going, I don't know if I'm going to see him again. There's some risk. There's some price to that. And some of you may do that permanently. You may walk out of this American dream completely and go, I'm going to go live my life for the sake of ministering to people who have no immediate help. Or you may do it temporarily, like my wife does. 3 or 4 times a year, she's flying off somewhere. And I just don't want you to wreck your joy. So one of the reasons I'm motivated about the financial thing is not to make you wealthy, or to make myself wealthy, but to maximize your joy forever. And I don't want to see people waste their lives. Because I don't want to get to heaven and you go, why didn't you tell me? I'm like, oh, my bad. Should have said something. And I can't claim ignorance because the scripture is pretty clear on this, right? Remember, Jesus, it's such a powerful statement, and it's usually misheard. He says, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. See, I always read that backwards. I always read that as, if I want to find out where your treasure is, I'll check your checkbook. And I'll see where your heart is. So like, if my heart really is for this, then my checkbook will follow, but that's not the way it works. It's the other way around. He says where your treasure is, your heart will follow. So let me give it to you this way. Let's suppose you have a retirement account and you say, you know what, I'm putting all of my retirement on Coca-Cola stock. You take your entire portfolio, you buy Coca-Cola stock. What are you going to do on Monday morning?
Check Coca-Cola.
Check Coca-Cola stock. What are you going to do at the restaurant?
Check Coca-Cola.
You're gonna order Coca-Cola, right? You're not ordering a Pepsi, right? You got all of your investment there, so you're buying Coca-Cola paraphernalia, you're buying, someone offers you a Pepsi, you're like, get that out of my face, right? And so what's happened is your treasure has now led your heart down that direction. This is the way it works. Your treasure will lead your heart. And so if you put your treasure in a $500,000 house, that's where your heart is. And you buy the Cadillac Escalade, leather seats with, live feeds of CNN, I don't know, whatever, that's where your heart will be. If instead you have a 12-year-old car, your heart's not there, because that's not treasure. That's just means of transportation. And if you're living in a kid's room, of your house, that's not treasure, you know? That's just a place to lay your head at night. And so then you go, well, where's the treasure? Well, how about, you know, I spent a month in January training pastors in some locations in Myanmar, which was a pretty amazing experience, and at a Karen refugee camp in Thailand, and then at a place in Nagaland. And so my heart is in those places. I'll go back in January. In fact, I'm probably doubling the trip next year because I'm going to go to a couple places in Myanmar. And my wife and kids are going with me to the Karen refugee camp because they're going to do medical clinic stuff while I'm doing some training. And for me, that makes my heart sore. And you want those things in your life, not, oh, another bill, another. You want to be living free enough to where you're not dominated by those things. And I see both. Like I said, I had that couple sitting in front of me, and their life's dominated by the fact that well, that was the other weird thing. Well, by the way, this is weird, okay? So they show me the income, $8,000 a month. I add up all the expenses. I got my spreadsheet. I'm like clicking it all in. $4,700. I'm like, okay, there's $3,000 missing here. And they told me that they were short on their taxes, so they owed $3,000. I went, all right, so you need to be withholding more. Okay, so we fixed that. So go to your employer tomorrow and tell them, take this out of them. I went, even with that, it's $3,000 a month. And this is what I said. I looked at them and said, where's the $3,000? They looked at me, they went, $3,000 a month is a lot of money. You're telling me you don't know where it's going? They went, well, debit card transactions, cash withdrawals, restaurants. I was like, oh, okay, I'm starting to see now what's going on. They have no idea where this money is going. And they're a great...
Real quick, he speaks the truth. Spend less than you make and be patient. That's all I can say.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Thank you. Yeah. So, so I my heart broke for them because they're coming to see me because they're stressed out about it and they don't know what to do. And that, you know what the easy answer is when I tell you, where's $3,000 going? What you would say to them, what kind of advice would you give them? I'm looking at these numbers going, $8,000 income, $5,000 expenses, there's a $3,000 gap. These are all their bills, utilities, everything. So all that's left is spending money. What advice would you give them?
Stop spending money.
Stop spending money? What's that? Start tracking it, right? Yeah. Where's the money going?
Budget.
A budget. So those are the three things I told them. Is like, you gotta stop spending so much money, number one. When you do, you gotta be able to go, there's the withdrawal, here's what happened to it. Like, you should be able to look at your bank statement and go, oh yeah, look, there's that withdrawal. And then, okay, now, if that's the case, you get those two things solved, then it's like, okay, what can we spend? What is our budget? And stick with it, So, honestly, I think that couple in about 3 months, if they do everything I've suggested, there's some other things I've suggested them to do that will save them immediate money and cost them nothing. They're paying PMI on their home, mortgage insurance of $200 a month, and I think they're at 80% threshold. I told them right now, go call the mortgage company, get that house appraised for $300. You can get it appraised and save yourself $200 a month for the next 5 years because the market had gone up. I checked the value on their house. So if there's $200 a month, that pays for the taxes you needed to have withheld so you don't owe the IRS next year. So there are things you can do. So good financial management can make a difference. So I looked at that. They're like, oh, you can do that? They were completely unaware of that. So those kinds of things can be helpful. So having someone with some financial advice kind of look at your stuff periodically, I think especially for medical people, you guys are really busy and that's hard. So it's sometimes good to sit down with someone who's focused on the financial side of it and go, what should I do here? Just be careful. Choose someone that's advised, recommended from other people. There's a lot of snake oil salespeople out there who love medical people. So I hate to be rude about this, but medical people are notoriously awful with financial management. And you have a mark on you. You're an easy mark. And so get good advice from someone you really trust. So anything else? Yeah.
Oh, I just had a couple of questions. But what did you advise that couple to do about tithing, and then also kind of an extension / related? It's like, what do you recommend medical students and people who aren't necessarily making money to do about tithing. We've
Yeah.
talked about that before.
Yeah, okay, yeah. So I do think tithing is a good rule of thumb. I don't think it's a law in the New Testament. I think the New Testament is a law of grace. So, but the Old Testament, the legal requirement of the tithe, actually, if you add them all up, it hit about 22% of your income. But they're also running a government off of that. So it's a theocracy, and so there's a little bit of how do you parallel these things. The tithe that kind of got brought into the New Testament church is just kind of a rule of thumb, I think, and I would suggest that if you're making $250,000 a year, that a tithe may be too little. It actually would be a sign maybe of greediness, and if you're not making anything, you're making $1,000 a month and you're trying to tithe on it, that may be a sign of foolishness. That could be too much. So I don't think there's a hard and fast rule. What I would say is this, that I think a better rule of thumb is this. Live at less than what you take in, live at less than you take in so that you can give it away. And I would find a church you can covenant with that has a real heart, not just for ministry within the local church, but within the global reach of the church in terms of ministry to widows and orphans. Our church, about 25 to 30 cents on a dollar leaves our congregation to go around the world. And you're looking for a church like that because that means the whole of the people have that kind of attitude of it's not just about us and making ourselves feel better. So I would find a place like that and I would start contributing regularly. But I would do it regularly, planned, purposefully. Now, for a medical student, what I would do there is, obviously if you don't have any source of income, what I would do is tithe your time. Go work in the nursery. Go work with kids on Wednesday night.
Wow.
Spend an hour or two a week where you go, I'm going to take my time away from this, which is I know is what you guys are mostly doing, which is why you all probably need major vision help now because you've been doing this for so long, and go serve somehow. So you can tithe your life, tithe your time and resources that way. So if you don't have resources to give in terms of money, you guys are all incredibly gifted people. And there are other ways you can kind of impact or whatever the church or the community at large. So I'd find other ways. Tutor some kids after school. Find some at-risk kids. I was doing that for a while at a middle school near us. I'd bring them pizza every day and we would eat lunch and I would teach them for the tax test at the time. And the principal of the school said, is the preacher here yet? Which was weird because it was a public school, but I had these 5 or 6 students and I would buy them pizza 3 days a week. I'd come in and I would do math problems for the tax test for the whole time and they would eat pizza. And it was these students that they considered at risk to not pass the math part of it. And if they didn't, they weren't going to 9th grade. And so for 3 or 4 months, I just tried to get them over the hump for that test. 3 of the 5 passed and were able to move on. And so, find some place like that. And that's not even money. So find other ways to live with your life open. My church did a really cool thing, by the way. So I was running off to these places to do pastoral training. This is my passion, is to train pastors in indigenous locations who don't have access to seminary, theological training, and to train them. So like in Myanmar, I had 200 pastors and church planters there, about 75 at Nagaland. And then in Myanmar, in the Korean refugee camp, a set of about 60 or 70 there. And so my desire is to do that. But I realized I was kind of running off and disappearing for 2 or 3 weeks at a time. And so I went to the deacons. I went, hey, is this okay? And one of the deacons said this. He goes, well, we as a church try to tithe or more in terms of missions and giving. They said, we're just going to tithe you. And they said, you get 5 weeks a year, go do whatever you want to do. So that's what they did. So 5 weeks out of the year, I run off all over the world and go to places that couldn't afford to pay for anything like that. And my church goes, that's our way of giving to those really gracious pastors who just don't have the same access that we have. So I'd say live that way. Tithe yourself. Tithe yourself. Find a way to give yourself. Because there's at-risk kids within a 10-minute drive of this campus who are about to flunk out of biology or chemistry or flunk out of math, and you have the skills to help them. And you could spend an hour or 2 a week just sitting next to that student going, here's how you do this. Some young lady that needs a young lady like you guys to just come alongside her and make her value feel like it's not built in the fact that she made an F last semester. Some young man who's like, man, my value is about this big right now, and you guys come alongside. No, you can do this. We'll get you through this. And they're texting you like, how do I do this problem? And So there's ways to give outside of money. So while you're in medical school, yeah, it's really hard to give the way that you would normally think of traditional giving. But you guys are really gifted and you can find ways to do that. Time-wise, I'm gonna get you guys in trouble. We out. Man, I wish we had more time to talk to this, but you guys, you're so gifted. Your future is so bright, and I really long for your joy. And if you have a financial question, Stan's got my cell phone number. You can just text me, okay? Say, well, what do I do about this or that? You may even get out a week from now and you're confronted with something. You are free to call or text me. And I'm a pastor. I'm not a financial advisor. I'm going to give you from a pastoral perspective. I'm not telling you what stocks to buy or anything like that. If you have a question like that and you really think I might be able to help you, seriously, you have free reign. You can call or text me anytime. Okay? So, okay? Is that okay? Is that all right?
Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks, Daniel. Let's close in prayer. Most heavenly